Welcome everyone to the launch of SmartScore, the world's first global certification for smart buildings. My name is William Newton. I'm the president of WiredScore. We're incredibly excited to be here today, and we're delighted that nearly 2,000 people from around the world can join us. We really wish that we could be all together in person, but it's through the wonders of modern technology that we can at least be together virtually. If you'd like to follow along with your event participation, your social media handles are on your screen. We've got a really exciting agenda today, including WiredScore's Technical Director Sanjaya Ranasinghe talking us through the intellectual framework behind SmartScore, the revelation of the first buildings in the world that are going to be going through the SmartScore certification process, and a panel of industry-leading experts talking about the future of smart. But first, I'd like to hand over to New York to WiredScore's founder and CEO, Arie, to talk a little bit more about why we developed SmartScore.
Thank you, William. I'd just like to reiterate what William said. I am delighted to welcome you all to the launch of SmartScore today. I really wish we were doing this in person, but I'm excited that this format allows us to have people joining us from all over the world. I'd like to set context today by sharing about who we are and why we do what we do. WiredScore is the certification company for in-building technology. We assess and improve digital connectivity and smart technology within homes and offices around the world. I started WiredScore back in 2013, wanting a better connected future. It occurred to me that now more than ever, we depend on technology to communicate with the world around us. But we've never been able to choose where we work or live based on the quality of internet connection. Seamless connectivity shouldn't be an occasional luxury if you're lucky enough to stumble upon it. Instead, it should really be as dependable as the oxygen we breathe, given how foundational it is to everything we do. We launched in New York under the guidance of Mayor Michael Bloomberg. And Bloomberg realized that for New York to continue to be an attractive place for businesses to base themselves, the thing companies rely on more than anything else, connectivity, had to be provided in its buildings. The value of a rating system for connectivity in buildings caught momentum across the US. And then in 2015, we moved to the UK, this time in partnership with the Mayor of London. Since then, demand has led us to expand across the globe, opening offices and starting to work in France, Germany, Canada, Italy, the Netherlands, Spain, Portugal, and Australia. And over those years, we've certified some of the most iconic buildings in the world, from the Salesforce Tower in Sydney to the Shard in London and the Empire State Building here in New York. It's also true that most of the top 100 landlords worldwide are already working with WiredScore. But what's more is that the world is changing, and the pandemic has accelerated this change. We now imagine a different built environment, a better built environment, because we believe fundamentally that we shape our buildings, but thereafter they shape us. No metric better reflects our impact than the fact that over 6 million people around the world work or live in WiredScore certified buildings. Of course, many of those people are currently working from home, almost certainly remembering the merits of a well-connected office. I mentioned previously that I founded WiredScore based on a vision of a better connected future. Now, I don't just want a better connected future. I also want a smarter one. My goal is for 1 billion people to work in smart buildings within 10 years, and I believe that this is achievable. Improving our buildings is one of the most powerful ways we can address the biggest challenges of our time. For example, staving off climate change, advancing our health and wellness, and strengthening our physical and digital security. And I'm confident that companies shaping the future will be working in WiredScore and SmartScore rated buildings. It is on that note that I am incredibly proud to introduce our vision for SmartScore. SmartScore is based around people, around humans. The user of a smart building should be the central point around which a smart building is oriented. I think for too long, discussions about smart started with technology, and they shouldn't. They should start with users. Smart must put the user first, beginning with the outcomes that the user wants and needs from a building, and then deploying the relevant technologies to deliver those outcomes. An outcomes-focused smart building uses the best necessary technology to provide outstanding experiences for its tenants, operators, and owners. This means all people who benefit from the space, primarily office workers and tenant companies, but also visitors, building managers and operators, owners and investors, and even wider society. Although technology is both a significant driver of change and a fundamental part of the solution, the changes we make as an industry need to start not from the technology, but from the people. Putting that differently, technological success is determined by the outcomes technology delivers for people. High-tech space is not a goal in and of itself. It is with that context set that we are delighted to share more about our smart buildings future throughout the rest of our program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arie. As Arie said, we believe that the future is smart. There are three trends that are precipitating the move of the real estate industry towards this smarter future, and it's worth going into these in a little bit more detail. Firstly, technology in everyday life is driving demand for more data and for better services. In our personal lives, we become accustomed to a tech-enabled lifestyle. From exercise to education, entertainment to e-commerce, our reliance on technology has normalized a level of speed and of accessibility and of convenience. And we now rightly expect that this should be present in our professional lives too. Secondly, changing working habits. The way we work has changed, and our workplaces need to adapt. Modern working habits are collaborative and they're driven by technology. Think about shared documents and video conferencing and cloud-based computing and emails and even sync diaries that give you full visibility on who is doing what and when within your company. Our day-to-day jobs have become dependent on the outcomes that technology can deliver. 98% of office workers say that they would not be able to do their job with the same level of ease without technology. But even more than that, over half of them say they would not be able to do their job at all. Beyond tech dependence, the recent pandemic-induced shift in working habits that all of us have been through has emphasized how important it is to get the office space right. Landlords must work harder and more collaboratively to create environments that are attractive to the working world. Otherwise, their spaces simply won't survive. And thirdly, the climate crisis. Tackling the climate crisis is the global imperative of our time. The built environment alone generates emissions equivalent to over 8.5 billion tons of carbon dioxide annually. Buildings and their associated emissions contribute nearly 40% of all carbon emissions globally, creating mounting pressure on real estate to provide a green path forward. If we are to collectively meet our global carbon reduction targets and limit global warming to below 2 degrees centigrade, the real estate industry needs to play its part. In acknowledgement of these trends, the industry has started to evolve. But while most buildings now involve at least one aspect of smart technology, there exists no consensus on what makes a building smart. We need a global standard so that the industry has a straightforward, usable blueprint for creating and measuring the smart buildings of today and tomorrow. With that in mind, for the last year, we've undertaken to create this consensus. The first step of this process was convening the WiredScore Smart Council, composed of the most progressive property companies in the world. Talking to this group of tenants and landlords and leading property thinkers, we've been asking what it is that a smart building is. Because any definition of smart needs to be by the industry and for the industry. We've heard thousands of hours of conversation with these tenants and landlords, developers and engineers, agents and technologists. Thank you to everyone who is on the call today, who has taken part and provided such rich and generous input. The WiredScore Smart Council has provided important insight and understanding of what a smart building is and what it should do. And honestly, the Council has also provided hours of really fascinating conversation with leading thinkers in our field, for which I'm incredibly grateful. We wanted to give you a sense of what some of these conversations have been like. So we'll put on our website after launch some videos from the leading practitioners in their field talking about their views on smart. We wanted to give you a preview by showing the first of those videos now.
It's difficult to imagine why you wouldn't care about smart, to be honest. And that's because if you think about the way technology is so prevalent throughout our whole lives, it's really difficult to imagine why it wouldn't be more prevalent in real estate. The way we design, the way we build, the way we operate, and the way that we occupy.
It's inevitable, it is the way of the world. We are moving into a fully tech-enabled digital era, and we will need to be ready to adapt and change as it comes. It runs through everything from conception all the way through to delivery, with user experience running all the way through that.
We're a very data-driven culture, and a lot of our insights and the decisions we make now are based on the data that we receive.
Technology is changing commercial real estate at a very fast pace, allowing us to fundamentally reevaluate not just things like productivity, but importantly, the environmental impact of buildings.
I mean, at the end of the day, a building is a living and breathing element. While it's defined by concrete and glass, it's what is inside on a technological basis that will define its performance and customer satisfaction.
Smart buildings really matter right now. We're just coming out of the end of a global pandemic, and actually I feel more comfortable if I have more information about the environment that I'm working in. And so ultimately, the sort of building that I want to be working in, is a smart building.
I call COVID the great accelerator. And I think real estate, which has been maneuvering its way through digital transformation, has been accelerated dramatically. And if you think about the need for contactless technology moving forward, the ability to communicate with tenants and employees in a more seamless way.
You need to have a conversation, a digital conversation with literally everybody who walks in that building, whether they work there, whether they live there, whether they are visiting. And that feedback loop through our phones is what is becoming, increasingly important in terms of the granularity of data that we're able to collect.
Because of the pandemic, users want to be able to understand occupancy levels through the building and air quality in those areas in order to safeguard their health and well-being. Smart technologies enable us to leverage machine learning and artificial intelligence in order to understand these parameters and provide this information to users.
The role of the office is completely going to change going forward. In the history, we would go to the office to do work. Now, today, we can do work everywhere. We will come to the office to communicate, to be part of a culture.
What's enticing me, what's encouraging me to go to the office? And so we need to have buildings to give you that excitement, that feeling that I can control my destiny with my mobile device, with my tenant app, that this building really cares about me from a health and wellness standpoint.
Buildings have a tremendous impact on the world's climate. The construction and real estate industries account for almost 40% of total worldwide carbon emissions. Different technologies play a key role at each stage of the building life cycle. They help us become more efficient, reduce waste, and save time and energy.
All of this cannot be achieved without technology. And it's there where smart buildings have a big competitive advantage again. By collecting energy data, optimizing the usage of energy, water, whatever consumption, we understand what's really going on there.
We need to have sustainability pulsing through everything in our company. We have an ambition to be net carbon zero very quickly. We expect that of our landlords, and if we don't get that, we're going to demand to move to different places. We have to start with a shared mind, which comes from a shared purpose, and needing to truly create definition around what success looks like. What are the standards, the non-negotiables that we should, as an industry, align around?
You can't have these developments built in a silo anymore. You have to have strong partnerships with key partners from your engineering teams, architectural firms, audiovisual, building control integrators. It takes a huge team.
Nobody can do it alone, and it's going to be necessary to work together.
It's great to see the industry come together and really attack these issues and provide a ever better workplace for our customers.
I'd like to now dive a little bit more into the SmartScore certification. To do so, we want to explore the intellectual framework that we've developed with the WiredScore Council. And for that, I'll introduce Sanjaya Ranasinghe, WiredScore's Technical Director.
Thank you, William. I'd like to spend the next few minutes talking about two key features of SmartScore certification: our smart building definition and the assessment framework that we will qualify smart buildings through. Firstly, smart building definition. A smart building is one that delivers outstanding outcomes for all users through digital technology to exceed their evolving expectations. This definition can be reflected via our assessment framework. I'd like to take a couple of minutes just to talk you through the framework itself. You see there are three layers reflected in the definition: that of the outcomes defined by the building, the functionalities and features delivered to users, and the underlying technological foundation that enable them all. What this view of our framework shows is how critical the interdependencies are between each of the layers. So those four outcomes at the top are built on a group of six sets of user functionalities, which in themselves are built on 6 technological foundations. But the real key here is how they interoperate between each other and those interconnections that are caused all the way through the framework. To go through this, I'm going to go through level by level. Firstly, the outcomes. The 4 outcomes we've identified are that a smart building must deliver an inspirational experience. That means a workplace that attracts and delights users with flexible and personalized services. It must then continue to be sustainable, building a whole life carbon reduced footprint, using technology to operate the building more efficiently. It must be cost efficient. This is created by optimizing the building's performance to generate new user benefits. And finally, it must be future-proofed. And that means future-proof by design to ensure the building can adapt to new demands. Those outcomes are achieved in a building via a set of user functionalities. We've defined 6 categories of user functionality for the broad range of users that are impacted by a smart building. Those users are grouped into 3 sections: those that are involved in the ownership of the building, those in the operation of it, and those who occupy it and use it on a day-to-day basis. As well as looking across the breadth of these 6 categories that we put on the slide, it's also really important to consider each of those three types of users: the owner type, the operator type, and the occupier type within each of these categories. And these categories are individual and collaborative productivity, ensuring the spaces that are created in the building enable people to be at their most efficient and most effective. Then on to health and well-being, ensuring that we're creating a safer and healthier working environment for everyone associated with that building. Communities and services focus on the fact that buildings need to put forward the services, information, and build that sense of community within a building to really ensure that users engage with the space that surrounds them. And sustainability, by using technology to monitor and report on the key aspects of sustainability, ensuring that the building will drive to continual improvement in this area. Maintenance and optimization focuses on the fact that the systems in a building need to be continually configured, and the users in charge of operating them must make sure that they understand the detailed performance and data from a building to ensure that those maintenance regimes are finely tuned to meet best expectations. And finally, security. Make sure that all users in the building feel they have a safe and secure place to work in to ensure that they can be their most effective and innovate in the freedom that they desire. These 6 categories of user functionality must be underpinned by technology to ensure smart buildings are both scalable and adaptable for future needs. This technology is reflected in the lowest level of our assessment framework, that of technological foundation. Again, there are 6 key categories here. Digital connectivity, ensuring there's secure, reliable and dedicated digital connectivity to serve not only the operation of the building for those operating users, but ensuring it becomes the core of a smart building fit out for occupiers and tenants. This then helps interconnect the building systems. So these are the physical systems and software platforms that help control and run the building. Systems such as heating and lighting, but these also underpin many of the user functionality and smart features that we need to deliver in a building. Those physical systems and software platforms are brought together and transmitted through the building via the landlord integration network. This network runs through the building and not only connects the systems and software together, but also enables future features to be integrated in the building in a seamless manner. These first 3 categories that I've been through really focus on physical aspects of the building, systems and tools that are within the building. What's key to the technological foundation of Smart as well is that strategic part. It's covered in the last half of the technological foundation section. Firstly, governance. So having a smart roadmap in place to define the drivers and methodology on how a building is going to improve from smart, and ensuring that that roadmap has success measures, which is taking feedback from all the users to ensure that the improvements that are planned and implemented are really those that will continue to drive impact for everyone associated with the building. Cybersecurity is becoming an ever-growing emphasis in the world of technology, and this is an area that really must be focused on as smart buildings evolve. This is firstly looking at the policies, processes and procedures that are in place to ensure that building systems and data are secure, but then continuing to ensure that building is taking proactive steps to recognise unauthorised or unusual behaviour that could be symptomatic of an ongoing cyber attack. Finally, data sharing. This is something which is two-pronged. Firstly, looking at, of all those users and stakeholders involved with the building, are you taking best care over data that you hold about them? Are you using that data in an ethical way to only make sure you're delivering the features and functionality that best suit their needs? And secondly, for the building itself, with all the systems, technology and processes in place, a huge amount of data is being gathered and developed and scrutinised from the building itself. How all that data is brought together to produce a living digital version of the building is key not only to how the building can evolve and develop and deliver new features, but also ultimately in how the value of that building going forwards will be seen in the market, removing it from the risk of obsolescence where the lack of understanding of true performance of the building can be shown via this integrated data package. So if we build that all back together into the overarching SmartScore assessment framework that I talked about at the beginning, you can see how the key elements of the technological foundation are there that interface and interact to deliver a broad set of user features via the 6 user functionality categories, which ultimately end up delivering against the 4 key outcomes that are in place that really define a smart building. What's also really useful with this wide and broad framework is seeing how some existing approaches to smart building development can be overlaid onto it, and also how these approaches generally fail to deliver on their full potential. The first is what I call the siloed approach, where we look at 1 or 2 key pieces of technology, implement those on a building, and then see what features can be delivered as a result of those. What this leads to, as can be seen in the diagram, is a minimized set of functionalities, usually to only a subset of those 3 groups of users we talked about, And then that levels up into only an even smaller subset of the outcomes that a smart building really needs to deliver. The issues this approach causes is to then expand on the functionality and outcomes, you need to again reinvest and expand on your technological foundation base to enable the future of that building. And that's just more cost. The second approach is taking a technology-first approach. So we invest heavily across the broad range of technological foundation, ensuring each of those key categories is covered. But only then look at what functionality we want to deliver. And that approach, again, limits the outcomes the smart building will deliver and really hits home in the pain points when it comes to return on investment. This approach leads to a huge amount of investing in that underlying technology with very limited return because of the narrow scope led to and thought about in delivering functionality afterwards. Even if we expand this approach and say, right, we've invested in all of this technology, now let's do everything we possibly can with it. Taking this technology-first approach will only ever deliver a subset of features and functionality to a subset of users, ultimately, again, to that same position of only delivering a subset of the outcomes. The only way to ensure the full breadth and depth of this framework, and therefore the key aspects of a smart building are delivered, is to work top-down, as SmartScore aims for, which is, first of all, driving out the outcomes, ensuring all those outcomes are being met for all users across a range of functionality and features, and that those functionality and features are underpinned by a technology required to achieve them. And I think that really does bring us back to what I started with in this section, which is the definition of a smart building, being one that delivers outstanding outcomes for all users through digital technology to exceed their evolving expectations. Thank you very much for your time, and I'd like to hand back to William.
Thank you, Sanj. And now to the SmartScore launch buildings. I'm incredibly excited to be able to announce a remarkable set of buildings, the global pioneers of smart. SmartScore certification has been taken up across 7 different countries, with 70 buildings from 44 landlords committing, meaning that over 25 million square feet of office space is covered by SmartScore. It's our huge pleasure to be able to introduce you to them now. From Aberdeen Standard Investments, number 1 Knightsbridge. From Allianz 21 Pays. From Art Invest Real Estate, Hammer Brooklyn Digital Campus. From AXA, 22 Bishopsgate. From AXA, PCA Stream and Sefri Sim, Le Siège d'AXA, 25 Avenue Matignon. From AES Technology and Bentel Green Oak, BE6. From Boston Global Investors, 10 World Trade. From British Land, 100 Liverpool Street, 1 Broadgate, plot A1 Canada Water, and plot A2 Canada Water. From BWRE and Pinebridge Investments, Skylight Madrid. From CAIMO, 1 by CAIMO. From Carterra, Portland Commons. From CEG, 1 Globe Square, EQ, and Globe Point. From Columbia Property Trust, 799 Broadway. From Commerce Real, 2 Amsterdam. From Covivio, Alexanderplatz. From Derwent London, the Featherstone Building, and White Collar Factory. From Dream, Victory Building. From Edge, London Bridge. From Jessina, Le Siège de Jessina and Bourcy. From Great Portland Estates, 50 Finsbury Square, 160 Old Street, The Hickman, 16 Dufour's Place, and 1 Newman Street. From Greystar, 74M. From HFD 177 Bothwell Street. From Hines, Air. From Hines and Ivanhoe Cambridge, Texas Tower. From Immovala, L'Officine, Dreamview, and De Erable. From Ivanhoe Cambridge and Hines, CIBC Square. From Kingset, 700 University Avenue, Atrium, Scotia Plaza, and 2 Broad Street West. From Legal & General, a Legal & General development to be revealed soon. From M&G Real Estate and Nuveen Real Estate, 40 Leadenhall Street. From McLaren, The Works. From Momeni, 6 to 7 Magazinstrasse. From Morgan Stanley Real Estate Investing, JLL, and Anchorline Partners, 1 Post Office Square. From Nuveen Real Estate, Cube Berlin. From Pontscader, the Post Building, and the Adelphi. From Quadrant, YY London, and Plot A, 9 Elms. From Quadrum, 11 Belgrave Road. From Red Tree Capital, Angoulême. From Royal London Asset Management, the Earnshaw. From Rudin Management Company, 345 Park Avenue, 3 Times Square, and 80 Pine Street. From Signa, 60 to 61 Charlottenstrasse, and Elbe Tower. From Skanska, the 8 and 17 and M. From the John Butt Company, 151 North Franklin. And then from you and I, 20 Southwark Street. Well done to all of these buildings. If we were all together now in a room, I know that it would be full of wild and raucous applause right now. But in the absence of that, please do accept my sincere congratulations. And now to turn to our panel. I'm really excited to be hearing from some of the leading thinkers on the future of the property industry and of smart buildings. And to take you through the panel, I'm going to hand over to our host, Brad Greiwe, the co-founder of Fifth Wall, the largest PropTech VC fund in the world. Brad, over to you.
Well, it's an honor to be here. Couldn't be more proud of the work you guys are doing, both as an admirer and real estate participant, but more importantly as an investor in WiredScore. This SmartScore initiative is truly differentiated and a real need in the industry today, and couldn't be more proud to be part of this and hosting this moderated group today. Fifth Wall, as Will mentioned, is the largest venture capital firm focused on the built world globally. We do that in partnership with some of the largest real estate landlord operator investors in 15 separate companies and many geographies across the world, all of which are expressing sincere interest in navigating the smart building ecosystem. And with that, I want to introduce a panel because we want to dig into what that exactly means and the opportunity that's really in front of us that it looks like SmartScore is looking to help facilitate. We have a great panel here today. We'll start with James Palat, the Director of Workplace and Innovation at Great Portland Estates. We also have George Roberts, the Head of UK and Ireland at Cushman Wakefield. We have Sandra Gritty, the Director of Edge Next at Edge Technologies. Jacinda Laughlin, Director of Strategy and Innovation at Nuveen Real Estate. And Gregor Hajiv, the Head of Product and Development for Western Europe at Allianz. We're going to have 2 separate discussions today focused on 2 distinct themes. And let's start with the first one, which is why are smart buildings important? What people want and need has always evolved over time, and our buildings too have adapted. Now, however, driven in part by advances in technology, our expectations are transforming faster than ever before, and our buildings need to respond, which is a challenge in an industry where the pace of change has always been slow and measured. So Jacinda, let's start with you. What are the trends that are making smart buildings more relevant than ever?
Thanks, Brad. And I just want to say thank you to WiredScore. I'm very excited to be here today and a part of such an incredible panel of people. The things that get me the most excited, a couple things. Technology as a transparency enabler. Right now with technology, we have access to more and more information. So an example that most people might be able to relate to is I can go onto Google Maps and like find the most efficient route from where I am and where I'm trying to go. And I think that there's an analogy to be drawn there with building systems and optimizing for the best energy use within a building system. And then also allowing each user of the building to optimize for their most efficient workday. So technology is a transparency enabler. The other trend that I think is making smart buildings more relevant is the increasing awareness and accountability around ESG. So last month, Nuveen Real Estate made a commitment to be net zero carbon by 2040. That involves a number of steps, including operational optimization, so building systems and sharing data to the extent that that is going to help increase efficiency as well as reducing the energy use within that building. On-site renewables, off-site renewables, and global purchase power agreements, and then ultimately carbon offsets for a portion of the portfolio. So those are the things that we're exploring as part of our commitment for net zero carbon. As I said, the building systems is such a key piece of that in optimizing for operations, and then also around grid interoperability as well and active efficiency there. So those are a couple of things that I am excited about and that I think make smart buildings even more relevant today.
Yeah, just a couple. So that's definitely more than a few, and I want to try to unpack as many of those themes as we can here today. And let's start with a really important one, and I think one that has become even more relevant over the last 12 some odd months with the navigating the pandemic. It's really around users' needs and expectations and how those are changing, and what role do smart buildings play in responding to those changes. So, James, can we talk a little bit more about that? That seems to be the tip of everyone's tongue, but more importantly, I think real estate landlords are really starting to try to understand, how do I want to engage tenants when they come back to work, and how does the smart building revolution sort of play a role in that?
I think it plays a crucial role, but I think that the key part of that is really that this trend started way before the pandemic. We wanted to really get under the skin of this and really wanted to understand it. So we ran a series of independent focus group with random people of different ages across Europe to really understand what they wanted from their office. And we gave them a timescale to imagine 2030. And what they predicted then is that the things that were going to affect them were tech and big data, flexibility, and they wanted to work in somewhere that was actively tackling climate change. That's all fast forwarded to now. And fortunately, I think those landlords that have really thought ahead and worked out how to put those things in their buildings will really prosper. Because I think most businesses, it doesn't matter really what you're doing, you are faced with a world of disruption right now. And that is likely to continue for this next decade, because as we get to grips with the pandemic, then I think the effect of machine learning comes in. And for that reason, the workplace is never finished. I think the old world of a landlord thinking, I'm just going to collect the rent from you, here I go, is dead, is gone. Because what occupiers really need to understand is, am I getting the most out of my space? And you can only know if you're getting the most out of that space if you can measure how many people are using it, at what time of the day. But in order to understand how they're doing that, yes, we do that through sensors, we also need to engage with those occupiers. And that's why we've developed our engagement tool called Sesame that allows people to have offers. It helps them to plan their day before they even leave the office, leave their home to go to the office, to make sure it's safe, the air quality is great, but also just to have fun and connect, as well as controlling lighting the environment in that space as well. And when you put all of this together, we're getting a really rich sense of data about understanding how the buildings work. And once you can do that, then you can start to use predictive analytics to really optimize performance and close the performance gap between designed energy and operational energy. So it builds on what Jacinda was just saying, really. That ESG imperative is really to optimize the whole performance of the building, and it's why the world is so exciting right now, I think, despite all of the confusion that's going on.
Yeah, and I think you just made a really important point, right? Is that, historically ESG has just sort of been a check the box activity. And I think tying it to building performance is extremely important. And I think in order to do that, having access to the data that you referenced is important. And in doing so, you can optimize the building, but more importantly, you can start to create the data required to build brand and transparency, engage with the consumer in a way that feels more authentic, where you can truly build a differentiated experience at the building that can create competitive advantages while doing good for sort of the broader environment, which is I think something that is, I wouldn't say new, but something that I don't think has been approached in a programmatic fashion. And it's great to hear you sort of connect those dots effectively, because I think any office landlord or retail landlord, industrial landlord, assuming that they're going back to the way things were and coming out of this thing the same way they went going in, I think is assuming too much. And a smart building strategy could really be a great differentiator in coming out of this thing. So I think, Sandra, we mentioned data, and it's important to have a common way of measuring smart buildings. I think if we were to sort of historically, especially pre-pandemic, if we were to ask a bunch of real estate landlords, what's a smart building and how do you measure it, you probably get 100 different answers. So what are the opportunities that having a commonality brings to the industry?
Yeah, I think there's several. So we look at a couple things. First of all, it's a question of a lot of confusion in the market. There's so many opportunities. I mean, we just heard beforehand about point solution, technology push, hundreds of vendors kind of showing the same thing. I think there's also some lack of technology literacy in the real estate industry. So a lot of people hear the big words and the big phrases of AI and big data and IoT, but it's difficult to understand what's behind those terms and what can I actually do with it. So having that common ground to have conversations between stakeholders, between tenants and landlords, to actually start understanding what is it that we want to achieve, how do we achieve it, and getting everybody on the table and having a moment to start from and to kind of benchmark where I stand is super helpful. I think it's something that we've seen happening in other aspects of real estate and history. It's sustainability being a great example of that, where I think initially everybody wanted to do something with sustainability and people just started going off doing different things. And at some point there was so much opportunity in the market that people didn't know what is really now a sustainable building. And I think we're seeing that even more so with technology. And because technology, I think, has an even more fundamental ability to change the way that the relationship is between owners and tenants, something that James just mentioned as well. There's great opportunities for a more service-oriented, transparent relationship between owners and tenants, what we've seen in the past. Having a strong foundation that you can build upon and a common measurement of, when are we doing good and when not, is just going to help to accelerate this process and make it easier for those stakeholders to come together. So it's very exciting to see SmartScore being launched, and we are pretty hopeful it's going to help to accelerate this whole process in the market.
Yeah, and I think that commonality is so important, especially when it comes to making important decisions where time, energy, resources, and money is going to get spent. I think if the industry together really coalesce around what's important about smart buildings and how to define it, I think we can get to that end stage a lot faster, and I think the industry will be much better off because of it. So it's great to hear that groups like yours and the SmartScore are going to help. So that's George. Let's move on to you. Do you think how smart a building is all impact, rents, and value? We talked sort of about bottom line impact and connecting this at the building level. How would you explain the opportunity there?
So thanks, Brad. So look, I think COVID's brought into sharp focus what occupiers are looking for in their buildings. I think in very simple terms, a building's primary function has got to be to enhance the effectiveness of its users. And I think that manifests itself in three principal ways. So as you've heard before, the ability to provide a healthy environment, which encourages users to want to come to the office. And at the end of the day, to walk out of the door really having benefited from being in that office. I think secondly, as you've heard, the ability to really closely measure usage of energy and then to be able to effectively work to reduce consumption. Then finally, the ability to provide flexibility in changing work styles. Those three core needs, I think, are underpinned by technology and what I would expect to see within smart buildings. As an industry, certainly in the UK, I think we've become used to defining a top tier of office space as grade A office space. But I think what you're seeing and what you've heard is the changing demands of occupiers as such that I think a potential new alpha class of buildings going to develop. Buildings which are healthy, highly serviced, sustainable and flexible, enabled through technology. And I think it's inevitable that occupiers will gravitate towards those buildings. And in so doing, I think that a rental and value differential is likely to emerge between those alpha style buildings that can provide those core needs as compared to those buildings that can't provide those needs. So yes, I think it will go to value ultimately in a differential between those buildings, as I say, that are smart compared to those that can't be modified to create the same benefits as those top tier buildings.
And to stay on that theme, what are your thoughts as it relates to the opportunity for someone building a new building and those that are looking to retrofitting existing and to achieve that threshold that you just referenced?
So I think fundamentally, the opportunities for retrofitting, I think, are still as plenty as for new builds. There may be some compromises that had to be made, but the core fundamentals, I think, of the three areas which I've highlighted, I think are as relevant for buildings that are retrofitted as they are for new build buildings. So I don't think that new has to be the defining differentiator. I think buildings can be repurposed to provide those core underlying functions to still give those benefits that I articulated that occupiers are likely to need.
Great. Yeah, I think it's an important conversation because I think most people associate smart building with new developments, and I think to the point, right? I think there's a massive retrofit opportunity here where sort of the average can be increased, and I think SmartScore can allow operators to navigate that appropriately in a way that might have felt like it was impossible prior. So it's great to hear that the entire industry can benefit from this. So Gregor, let's make this real. What is the value of smart buildings to Allianz? I just want to sort of unpack some of this thematic discussion and start to really understand how you can apply it to an organization as large as yours, taking advantage of this trend.
Many thanks, first of all, for the invitation today. And I'm very happy to be next to all these great people virtually here today. So I'll need to sum up, I will answer your question, but I will also sum up some elements that I've heard today in the last 1 hour from an investor perspective. So Brad, you mentioned Allianz Real Estate is the largest real estate investor worldwide, and we develop and execute portfolio and investment strategies on behalf of a range of global liability-driven investors. So since more than a year, we are running an ambitious global asset digitalization and smart upgrade program, so including retrofits that we call internally Allianz Building Signature Program. And we believe that smart and digital innovation are key contributors for the maximization of the portfolio value while reaching carbon neutrality for us by 2050. And when I say maximization of the value, I think here mainly about increasing the net operating income and the market value. So we can reach that, I believe, by working on three main components. And here I will sum up at least what I have heard today. So the first one is the user component. As an investor, we are obliged to better understand and get closer to the users in and of our assets. We need to use data to improve the user experience, efficient layouts, identifying bottlenecks, and so on. For us, it is extremely important to provide excellent health, security, and well-being conditions for the users in our assets. And our experience is showing that we attract more and more strong tenants who share our focus on user experience. So it's very important for us to see that the market is going there and that this demand is real.
ultimately part of the value of the asset is coming from the way that the tenant is using it, and it's making what the tenant is making out of it. So the second component of this, let's say, value generation or value aspects of the smart is coming from the way we use data to improve the operation of the buildings. So here, I don't speak so much about the technology in itself, but really, what do we do with the data? For example, what do we do with the predictive maintenance data? It's helping us to increase the availability of the technical equipment. It's increasing the lifespan, and as a consequence, it is increasing the tenant satisfaction, and therefore, we optimize the operating income and the asset value again. So data is absolutely a key outcome of the smart aspects of a building. And the third one, it has been mentioned already 2-3 times today. This is, I think, the most complex one, is how to achieve carbon neutrality by whatever, 2040 or 2050, and to reduce the energy consumption, because this is as important as reducing the carbon footprint. And we are very engaged in this field, and I personally believe that the scaling features of a smart building are one of the low-hanging fruits to achieve this carbon neutrality or improved energy performance through, for example, smart energy monitoring solutions or even energy management solutions that I'm sure most of the people here are currently implementing or at least planning to implement.
Wow, that's impressive. An organization as large as yours sort of taking this initiative and successfully executing across your broad portfolio. I did mention at the beginning of this sort of the response required and the challenge that our industry, with regards to the pace of change, being slow and measured. This is sort of for the entire group, and feel free anybody to jump in. For you guys have seen and to help facilitate success in SmartScore and smart building capabilities. How would you recommend other groups who are just starting this journey positioning themselves to take advantage of this, both from an execution, from a cultural, from a branding perspective? How do you get started in this space to generate the outcomes, the successful outcomes that many of you are experiencing already?
Well, Brad, I think one of the things that we do. Sorry, go ahead.
No, Sandra, go ahead, please.
Ladies first. I'm just going to take that ticket for now. I think some of the things that we have seen, and I think that's also where WiredScore is taking it, is just starting with outcomes. And I think that's also something that we see with Allianz and how they're approaching it is don't start with looking at a specific type of sensor or a specific type of mini use case or point solution, but look at what are the KPIs that I want to achieve. Can I quantify what I want to do? What is the bigger picture of what we want to do? And then from there, find then the matching technology solution and the matching partners which can facilitate that. So I think that try not to get lost in the forest of tech opportunities, but look more at the bigger picture. And I think that's what we've seen also in the answer from Gregory. Is that's kind of that's an approach which, with the customers that we've been working with, both on the tenant and the owner side, have resulted in the most successful results when it comes to smart implementations. And same goes for Edge and the way that we develop buildings. So focus on the outcome and what you want to achieve with it, and then let the technology follow with it. Then you also don't get stuck along the way so easily.
James, did you want to add?
If I can just add, I think the other thing is that thing I've come to realize is that most people in real estate have a really poor imagination. So they get this concept of a smart building, but you need to go out and educate yourself about what it is you want to get, and look at it and feel it and touch it and understand those things. And I think the other thing I'd suggest, and you were talking about the retrofit point, is don't underestimate the value of doing it in a small building somewhere in your portfolio. Don't feel like you've got to do a massive swing of the bat for this huge building. It takes time, it takes ages to get feedback from the occupiers. So we've put it into our flex spaces. So one of the buildings on that list is a 16,000 square foot building, but the occupiers love it. And we get much quicker feedback from them. So again, adopt that sort of point of fail fast, be prepared to listen and adapt it as it goes on. And actually, in those smaller buildings, sometimes it's easier to implement than the bigger ones. So look at both sides of the scale as well, I think, is the thing I'd encourage to look at.
Yeah, and I would just add, I mean, Sandra and James both make really good points, but that sort of proof of concept or pilot, I think in real estate, we're used to such like monumental big buildings and big deployments of capital. And it's so important to kind of start small and, like James was saying, have lessons learned and embrace failure a little bit. I think the pace of change with technology is so different. And to just touch on a couple other points that were raised, defining SMART. My title is Strategy and Innovation, which sounds really cool, but like, what does that even mean? I think it's important for me to define that to people in the conversations that I'm having in the context of that conversation. I think it's really important for companies to define what they mean by SMART and talking to the end users. I think the categories that Sanj was referring to earlier, as far as owners and then also the occupiers, as well as the property teams, like going out and talking to facilities managers, asking them what their biggest pain points are, doing the same thing with your customers, with your occupiers. We kind of have the benefit of at least being able to put ourselves in their shoes, because we're also working out of offices during more normal times. So empathizing and kind of opening up from your day-to-day to the perspective of other people. And then just something else I wanted to point out, because we were talking about value, and don't quote me on these numbers, but just roughly, I've heard for business operating costs, I think it's about 1% spent on energy, 9% on rent, and then 90% on people. Again, I'm sure it's different for every business, but as a rule of thumb. And so while it's super important to focus on reducing energy use for a lot of the goals and values that our companies share, that 90% spent on people, it's so important to think about whatever we're doing to optimize productivity for the users of a building. And all of the panelists have mentioned this already. So I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I thought those numbers were really kind of staggering the first time that I heard them. And so if you think about the exponential effects of being able to increase productivity just 1% or less than 1% for those large costs for a business, it's really meaningful, and often it gets excluded from ROI conversations because it's not direct as direct as kind of energy or cost savings. So I thought it was a point worth raising.
Yeah, and I think it's actually a point worth maybe exploring further, because I think you bring up a very important point. And again, I think this is part of the evolution of thought as it relates to how landlords are going to be coming out of the pandemic, and the premium placed on being able to monetize the tenant customer in a more diverse fashion moving forward, moving well beyond lease negotiation and starting to offer products and services and capabilities and productivity, a whole host of different ideas that typically landlords never had to frame and execute on before. And with the SmartScore sort of initiative, hopefully being armed with much more information and capability will allow you to start to think through, what does it mean to be a landlord of the future, and how can I take advantage of these capabilities and provide a better consumer experience. But how do you change that directive, right? Because it's always been about the dollars and cents, the lease negotiation, sort of like traditional four wall. And how do you start to expand that to service a consumer in a different, more sort of thoughtful way? How do you change that conversation internally?
So
I don't want to
give one
talk too much.
example with.
Go, Gregor.
No, okay, good. So we heard like from Naveen's side, the head of strategy and or director strategy and innovation. We took it a little bit differently at Allianz Real Estate. So we said that in our region, West Europe, we have this product and development team that I'm heading, because as Brad, you have mentioned, putting all those smart aspects in one technological perspective in one building is not answering the question, how do we make money? So from our perspective, it is extremely important to link all those aspects with the asset strategy in itself. So first, in our process, we systematically think about, what do I want to achieve with this building, and not only from a user perspective, but holistically, what kind of returns do I want to achieve, what kind of public I'm targeting. And this asset strategy for us is really at the beginning of everything. So we need to have a very clear vision. Where do we want to go? And then to put on the market products that are encompassing and bringing together all these different elements. What do I do with the tenants? How do I manage and monitor the building? And on top of it, from an investor and asset management perspective, we're obliged to learn and to switch towards more data-driven decision-making process. And this sends us to something new, and we adapt and adjust our organization constantly to that. So we adjust our roles and responsibilities to make sure that we're ready to what we call internally asset management 2.0. And this asset management 2.0 is extremely data-driven, and SMART is one of the key points that help us to switch to this asset management and investment management 2.0, which is extremely data-driven. And I'm looking here a little bit at Sandra, because we work together on different projects, and I'm making a smile, like little smiley in that field. So it's absolutely key to move into this direction, but to have a physical product that makes sense on the market, because ultimately our local people in different geographies, they constantly repeat that to us. You can have the most digital and advanced building, but if it doesn't fit into the local micro locations and market, it doesn't make sense.
Great. And we're getting to the second theme of the day, which is really around sort of how you're on these trends. And I think we just sort of highlighted a handful of those, and it's really about, outcomes focused smart building using the best and necessary technology to provide outstanding experiences for tenants and operators and owners, et cetera. There's so many stakeholders that are needed to be serviced by this, which again, I think this is part of the opportunity, and this is giving you the ability to take advantage of those stakeholders in ways that you probably haven't before. So Justin, I'll go back to you. I want to talk a little bit more about smart building outcomes that you're most excited about. You mentioned a handful of themes earlier, but can you walk through, and maybe this is Nuveen related, but can you walk through a handful of outcomes, just again, making this real for the audience here that you guys have been focused and potentially experienced in your own portfolio?
Yeah, I'll talk about two kind of metrics that I've really landed on to give focus to the next few years, just because there's so much opportunity and different strategies to pursue. And it is a bit repetitive, but I think that's good. It's a little validating hearing what the other panelists have said. So reducing energy use, that is an outcome that I am very excited about. And frankly, a lot of that is going to not be super smart initially. A lot of the existing inventory for real estate is quite dumb. And so there's steps that need to be taken as far as switching from pneumatics to digital controls, doing maybe some basic sensors on the BAS system and regular reviews of that data, even if it's a little bit more manual. Moving on to fault detection and diagnostics and predictive maintenance and those sorts of buzzwords that get a little bit more exciting. But I think it's important to kind of acknowledge there's some no and low tech steps that need to be taken in reducing energy use. So that's one outcome. And then the other outcome is improving tenant satisfaction or net promoter score. So those are two metrics that I really think it's important to focus on. And those are the two at the end of the day that I'm, okay, have I been spending time on those things? And there's a ton of different ways to obviously increase tenant satisfaction that, have been mentioned before. I really like WiredScore's definition of a smart building. And I like to talk about an omni-channel office experience. So really kind of answering to the needs that people have for increased flexibility going in and out of the workplace. So tenant engagement apps is something that we've spent a lot of time on in the last year and a half. And I think just having that go-to place for occupiers to log in and be able to reserve a room or register a visitor, anything along those lines, access local deals at nearby retailers. The thing that I get the most excited about, and again, it's kind of back to basics with our tenant engagement apps, is just the communication lines opening up between us and each of the building users, them being able to, at their discretion, if they want to rate the amenities, us being able to send out short form feedback and get surveys. So just hearing more regularly from them is something that I think is really important. But yeah, increased tenant satisfaction and reduced energy use are my the two things I'll return to as clear outcomes.
Great. And Gregor, back to you. How do you? I think Jacinta alluded to some different, sort of vendor and technology opportunities that they're taking advantage of to reinforce some of their smart building capabilities. How do groups like yours and other landlords keep up with the rapid change in technology, seemingly that is changing every day?
Thanks, Brad, for this question, because since I'm speaking here, I received more than 20 messages of partners asking me to mention something about them as well today. So let's put it in this way. To keep up with the rapid change in technology, this requires a good understanding of the value chain and the stakeholders within the real estate industry. But it requires also an excellent understanding of the global trends without repeating them, but mainly working from home or the personal adoption of technology from people. So therefore, to keep up with rapid change in technology, we work in parallel in two complementary directions. So two main approaches. One is interaction with the outside world, and the second one is this constant agile adjustments of role and responsibilities within the company. And I think today will be my day to speak about internal topics. But let me start quickly with the external world. So we are systematically partnering with market leaders who provide best-in-class technologies, tools, and services. And we constantly try to create this kind of link with our internal capacities of data gathering. I'm again insisting on the word data here, because we need to make sure that all technological solutions are compliant with our capacity to manage data. And second, we are also partnering with PropTech communities and startups very actively across Europe, but also in APAC and the States, and with like-minded peers. I will not mention Nuveen today, but also academic institutions and also other specialized R&D partners mainly on decarbonization. Our focus is to say that we do management and investment, we concentrate on our business, and for the rest, we just work with the best in class. The second aspect is this internal organizational stuff. So this is extremely important when you are international landlord, because we are systematically looking for a balance between the identification and implementation of local best-in-class solutions and running global scalable business. And this is where the smart is coming. So to illustrate, Sandra also already mentioned that we need with the best-in-class solutions in Asia, in the different European countries, but in the same time, we need to make sure that the data devices is in a central place to process it, to understand what this data means. And this requires to have this kind of organizational, this kind of central place in the organization where we can put this data, where we can analyze it and understand it. So this is a perfect mix between this kind of local needs and work with the best-in-class local players, but in the same time make your organization agile enough to be able to handle this huge quantity of information that is coming across the globe. So I think this should be the same for all investors and players that work, let's say, internationally in several countries, where the culture is very, very different and the technological status is very different from one to another one.
You are setting the bar extremely high. That is an incredible overview of how to connect the dots across global opportunity and various stakeholders, both in and outside of your buildings. So again, I think that's here, which is awesome. I think there's obviously a lot of steps that were taken in order to get there. So I want to take it down to sort of the beginning stage, and maybe we'll start with you, Sandra. I think there's the first hurdle to overcome is, all right, if I'm going to invest and partner in these technologies, how do I justify it? What's my return on investment? It's often difficult to measure potentially upfront. I want everybody to get to where Gregor is, because that's like where the industry needs to go. But how do you answer the first question of like how am I going to make this investment and why?
Yeah, I think the main starting point there is, and I think that's that divides the early adopters from the ones which follow, is that there's a strong belief, I think, with the different parties that we're working with that, digitalization is going to happen and it's going to have a huge value add. And we're trying to take our customers along what we've learned so far. And the main thing for us in terms of an investment where you start off from is that we don't know all use cases yet. Nobody predicted COVID and could have foreseen this acceleration in home working. Nobody predicted that suddenly everybody knows about aerosols and everybody wants to know exactly what's going on in my air quality, right? So the main thing that we advise in terms of, investment and getting started, and I think that it resonates a lot with also with what Gregory is saying, is you need to get a good basic platform to get your data together, to get that orchestrated, to get that organized. And then you have a foundation that you can build about, and that gives also you the flexibility to react to future changes. And those changes might be a new pandemic or something, another trend which happens in real estate, but you are able to leverage the same basis and foundation in multiple ways. And I think that's where, the starting point is to really understand how that goes. And that, for some extent also requires the real estate industry to level up in terms of tech literacy, to understand what we're talking about. Also what James said, get out there, try to understand what it really means to work with, data and IT and IoT and everything else. And adopt it and make that an inherent part of your company and what you do, and get people on board which know what they're talking about, to go through that first of known verbals and lingo that people don't tend to understand. And that's just, for us has been really helpful in this investment part, is driving on innovation and understanding that, we see the benefits of what we can do. We've seen the first signs of it, and we keep on working to make sure that every time we take new steps and you take those, maybe those first pilots, or you try something new, you try an innovation with every single building that, Edge rolls out, and also now what Edge Next does in servicing, existing buildings and owners of larger portfolios, is trying to help them with the first step to get a good understanding of where do I stand, where are my problems, where can I expand, where can I go next, so that you create a sort of level of trust that you can build upon to then go to those higher level of value add. Also as mentioned by Nuveen, it's at the end the holy grail is to get this amazingly productive space that we can measure how people are going to feel and do, and that we can provide them with the perfect experience. But we can only get there if we build upon those first quick wins, and then that way you keep going. But the only thing that you should avoid is start with a point solution, then hope to build out from there, because that most likely will get you stuck one way or another, because you're very specific. But we really recommend our customers, and that's the way we work, to start from getting a broader overview, but then just a couple of indicators per thing on sustainability, on well-being, on asset use, understand where am I going and where do I have the biggest gaps, and then build out from there. So this strong foundation, I think, is the best advice that we can give in terms of both existing buildings starting to implement it on existing portfolios, but also on new builds, to then be ready for the future, and also then to get that ROI back, and being able to leverage the same data point several times for achieving a different use case again, instead of doing all kind of point solutions and then trying to bring that all together at some point, and it gets very confusing.
Yeah, Sandra, I think that's a really important point. And we see it all the time in navigating the prop tech ecosystem, especially with traditional real estate incumbents, in that I think there's this misconception there is a silver bullet that a venture capital funded business can solve a massive problem for the organization, especially in the realm of data. And that's been one of the most frustrating arenas to navigate, because it's really about what you're saying. This is about a long-term strategy and plan. And it's about investing the time, energy, resources, and most importantly, capital in order to get there. And that can't be done one-off point solution. It has to be done by a true business development strategy and plan that gets you to that end stage. All these point solutions and venture and this venture ecosystem can help get you there, but you have to be willing to sort of navigate it in earnest. And it's great to hear you kind of lay out the roadmap of which to do that most effectively. And so, James, let's go to you, because I think Gregor sort of laid down the gambit in terms of like why this is important. It's because groups like Allianz are doing all these incredible things to leverage this ecosystem to create significant, potentially competitive advantages for their business, and also to sort of move the needle forward as it relates to smart building opportunities. But when it comes to sort of those that are thinking about this, like is anybody that's sort of not implementing a smart strategy risking becoming obsolete? And if so, how quickly will that happen?
Yeah, And this is quite nice. This feels like a group therapy session. This is quite nice hearing everybody else, like Sandra and Jacinda, talk about our problems and dreams. And it's really tempting to say that, yes, if you don't implement this stuff, your building will become obsolete. But I'm going to add a note of caution to this as well, because I think that the really great thing that I welcome about SmartScore is that it will help a marketplace understand the relative merits of a smart building. But more importantly, it still goes back to focus on the user. And I think we've got to be a bit careful as well, because users of buildings depends on how you feel about your employer observing you. So some people will see a smart building as an opportunity, and some people will see a smart building as you're monitoring me and you're snooping me and what's going on. And that will depend on the culture of the organization. And so I think what we've got to try and do is make sure that with all of that data, and I'm sure that Sandra and Grigor have done this as well, it's just that anonymizing it, understanding it, but communicating how clearly that we are not interested in an individual in a building, but what's the whole outcome. And I think that that's a really important thing, because a smart building itself may become obsolete because people will feel like it's snooping on them. So it's getting that mix between that comfort and trust and the benefits to the occupier. And I think you've really got to look at those use cases and start at that point. But I think the thing that's more likely to make a building obsolete is its environmental performance than its smart capability. I think you can have a great building in a great location, and it was great to hear George say that I might make some more rent, but people will still want to be in that building even if it doesn't have the smart capability. You just won't achieve as high an income from it. So I think they may become obsolete, but you've got to tread with caution. That's kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, George, can you kind of pile on there just in terms of your own experience, in terms of, the landlord and tenant relationship and how that's, the requirements needed to change and adapt and adjust. Can you kind of unpack the how there a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So there's a word that's been used on countless occasions here today, which I think is really relevant, which is productivity. And I think what's absolutely clear, I think to me, is that landlords are in the productivity game. Their job is to make the conditions that allow their customers to be as productive as they can be. And I think if there's any sort of question that landlords don't have the luxury of being able to move from an arm's length relationship to one where they're far more engaged, then I think those that don't see a relationship of heightened engagement will be the ones that are likely to miss out. And I think we're moving into a world where, as I say, landlords have a super opportunity to be much more operational, I think, in the services that they deliver to their customers. And I think that comes in a number of forms. I think there's the opportunity, as we said, to embed technology in buildings that does provide that opportunity to measure performance, to show how improvement can be made. I think there's a real opportunity for landlords to use their experience to really help occupiers improve their performance, improve their productivity, to work together to strive for continuous improvement. And I think occupiers will look to their landlords to help them make improvements in the way in which they use real estate. And we talked a little bit before about the opportunity for additional income streams, but I do see a world where the end user will, I think, look to the landlord to provide that end-to-end solution of those modifications that will then enable that enhanced performance. And I think that provides two opportunities for the landlord and tenant relationship. A, it provides a deeper and more embedded relationship, and therein a longer association in a building. But I do think it also offers up an opportunity for additional income streams that can be available through landlords, as I say, delivering more of an end-to-end solution to enhance productivity for end users. But I'll go back to what James said. I think the days of the landlords standing back, collecting rent, having an arm's length relationship with their customer are behind us, and we're better for it.
And is that being reinforced by the conversations you're having with tenants right now that are looking to come back to the office, sort of as sort of the pandemic starts to subside in certain locations. Can you kind of talk about what their priorities are and how those match to some of the discussions that we've been having?
Yeah, so I don't think that the trends that we're talking about are necessarily COVID centered. I think we've seen for the last few years, particularly on the sort of larger requirements, an increasing sense of larger occupiers wanting to partner with real estate providers that understand them and have a mindset of wanting to really engage in their needs and to deliver their needs. Increasingly across the portfolio level. So I think the larger occupiers are becoming more selective in looking not just at a building, not just looking at what the building quality is, not just looking at the technology in a building, but at the ethos behind a property owner, an investor, and how they're going to service their needs going forwards and stay vested in their relationship. And again, I think that provides a real opportunity for those very customer-centered landlords in particular.
Yeah, and it sort of brings up another point that anybody's happy to sort of answer, but we talked a lot about ESG and sort of the effects of climate and sort of the responsibility of the real estate industry being one of the largest greenhouse gas emitters to start to make sort of concerted efforts to start to solve that. Some are doing that just from the kindness of their own hearts. Others are being forced from a regulatory and monetary perspective. Some are doing both. But I guess the question really becomes, and this kind of goes back to the occupier discussion, for a lot of landlords, there's only so much they can do from a building perspective, but most of the energy use case comes at the occupier level. So with SmartScore and sort of the capabilities that are going to be enabled through it, how do you think that changes the conversation with the occupier in terms of being more thoughtful about working together to help sort of solve some of these share costs? Just redefine that relationship to actually solve, sort of some of the energy efficiency opportunities that sort of smart buildings really represent.
Well, maybe just to do it from like the real estate developer perspective and servicing portfolios. What we see is that through smart buildings, we're elevating the conversation beyond your energy bill. It's no longer just about how do you use data to I can save energy. It's how do I use data to give you a better experience in your building, which includes, energy savings, which we from a, corporate social responsibility and from our own, goals that we want to achieve as a landlord are coinciding. And by bringing that together beyond energy, you are actually creating those new use cases, those new business models that George was just talking about. So I think we see a real deviation between, the landlords, which are still looking at data as just transactional. So I care about all the data of my building when I'm leasing it out or when I'm buying it. And then in between, I don't care. I never look at it. It's in some dusty archive. And I only take it out again like 10 years later when I'm selling or when I'm, need to re-rent the building. And we see then those landlords which actually understand that there is value in data during occupancy. There's additional services that I can deliver. And I think that's going to be the have and have nots. I think the building itself will not become obsolete, but there will be landlords which can create many more business cases on a certain square meter and can service those customers much better with that property than others. And that's really going to relate to that kind of an approach.
I think it's quite simple.
Go on, sorry, James.
I just wanted to add one thing. I think we haven't really mentioned it a lot in this conversation, which is perhaps surprising, is as around the world people get used to the various different stages of COVID and coming back to the office, I think that understanding is going to take a good couple of years for occupiers to get used to how they want to operate their building. And at the moment, most energy in buildings runs at 100% irrespective of who's in the building. But learning how and when and how many days a week people are starting to come back is going to be a really crucial metric to understand. And I think it's those simple things which will help us communicate and work with those occupiers. And then I think just taking another metric, if you take the Leesman score and their recent working from home survey, the really fascinating one was when they had the same organization across 3 different countries in Europe. The higher Leesman score, had the most satisfaction, had people wanting to come back to the office 4 days a week. and the average Leesman score was down at 3 or 2 or 3. And so when you can understand how you can shape a space, especially if it's a furniture-led flexible solution, as a landlord to an occupier to encourage people to come back, then you're really adding that service and you're creating the demand for your building and people wanting to stay there or grow with you or shrink with you as you move along. But you only know that if you're understanding what's happening all of the time. And that's the real opportunity for the next few years, I think.
I was going to say, I think we're in a world where occupiers haven't had to account for how their building aligns to corporate objectives. But if you're setting corporate objectives which include carbon reduction targets, it is inevitable that there'll be a requirement to demonstrate how a building is aligning to that corporate target. And I think there'll be many occupiers who will need to look to landlords to help them in being able to account for that and to show that they're aligned in their use of real estate to wider corporate objectives, which again, I think presents an opportunity for engagement between those aligned landlords and their future customers.
And I wanted just to add here one remark on my side, going exactly in the same direction. We observed on more than 30 buildings that on this kind of portfolio view that the best results in energy performance or energy reduction measures or the environmental performance as a whole are coming and are available only when there is alignment of all stars. That means the tenants, the users, the site operator and the investor, the landlord, we share the same vision and we are like-minded. When those stars are aligned and we go into the same direction, the results are incredible. If one of the three is kind of hesitating if he wants to go there or doesn't know how to go there, but it's kind of creating a gap with the two others, there is systematically an issue. And currently the way that the buildings are operated, you need to have those three partners aligned and perhaps even more partners than the one that I've listed. But this is the strict minimum to get acceptable and meaningful results for on the ask level. And we are not systematically there yet.
Great. Well, listen, we're sort of coming up on time here, so I wanted to end with maybe just everybody going around the horn and just giving a quick response of with the SmartScore launch. Why did you want to participate in this panel, and what are you most sort of excited about from the future of WiredScore, the SmartScore capability, and sort of the opportunity for your organizations to participate, just so we can reinforce to everybody listening here why it's so important to engage. Why don't we start? Maybe George, we'll start with you.
So apart from the fact that William asked me nicely to join the panel, no, I think what's exciting is the opportunity to create a measure for the industry that hasn't been available up to this point. And I think it's something that will be as embraced by occupiers as much as landlords. And I think it really does provide a gap that's been missing for some period of time. So very excited to support in its rollout and development.
To add upon,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Sandra. Go ahead.
This was this Grigor? If it was me, okay, I'll go. I, with my team, we are, I think, among the biggest supporter of WiredScore. I think this is absolutely needed. We need to have a global standard, especially for a global player. This is making our life much easier. And we have for the first time something which is scalable. So guys from WiredScore, thank you very much for creating the SmartScore, and you can count on us.
Yeah, I think that resonates also with Edge. I think that we have, as James said, it's like, a therapy class here. We have a lot of like-minded innovators, which are front runners. And the great thing that WiredScore did is that they engaged, a huge group of, people which are already excited about the topic and trying to get this, moving, and now making it available at a larger scale for everyone to understand and learn from and see, which direction to go for. So we expect, a huge acceleration opportunity from this. And that's thanks to the efforts of WiredScore, engaging with those different parties, and trying to set a standard for everybody that we can work against and work with. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I usually, when I moderate, I try to make it much more contentious, but it seems like everybody's pointed in the same direction here. So reinforcing the end goal, I think, is the best way to spend this hour.
Yeah.
I think it's just to add to that point is that because WiredScore is a trusted brand anyway, and I really welcome them adapting and pivoting into SmartScore, because I think it gives the layperson who just touches on real estate, and also the tenant reps and the advisors and the people in our marketplace, something they can understand, and it's easy and clear to understand, and it gives everybody something to aspire to. So I'm hugely welcoming, and we're really supportive of the whole initiative. So good luck to William and everyone else.
Yeah,
Last but not
I'll
least,
just piggyback. I think the shared language is so important in the framework. We can start to build a collective understanding through that framework together, and acknowledge when maybe we've been saying the same word but thinking different things for a little while. I don't know if I'm sure other folks on this panel have been on a call, and then 30 minutes in you realize, oh, okay, we need to go back to, the foundation here and kind of reinvestigate what we mean by different things. So I think the framework's amazing. I love that they talk about the different stakeholders and really outcome focused, as well as the technological foundation. And it really just promotes great thought partnership, between, us and WiredScore and the buildings that we've tested this on, and we've got a couple certified. We've got others that we know what we need to do now. We have a better understanding there. And I think that, the thought partnership on this panel and the ongoing conversations and kind of trying to solve these big problems that we've talked about is really great.
Amazing. Well, with that, we'll wrap things up. I just wanted to thank everyone from both myself and the rest of the panel. How honored we are to be presenting today on this SmartScore launch event. Really excited about the future. Really appreciate WiredScore, sort of coming up with this amazing idea around codifying smart building and bringing it to the real estate industry programmatically in the coming years. Look forward to being an active participant. And excited about what's next. So, Will, I'll pass it off to you so you can close things out.
To Brad and to the entire panel for what was a really interesting discussion, and perhaps even an interesting therapy session for them as well. I think a couple of things stood out to me from that discussion. One was the focus on users and outcomes for those users. I will be so proud if the industry really starts talking about those two concepts above all when they're talking about smart buildings, because that's what matters, not the technology itself, but the outcomes that can be delivered to the users. I think maybe the second thing that stands out to me from the panel is a light sense of optimism, both in what smart can do for the future of the property industry, and if we collaborate, how we can actually get to a smart future much faster than we might be expecting otherwise. So this brings us to the end of the SmartScore launch. Thank you again to our panelists, to our launch partners, and to the WiredScore Smart Council. What next, I hear you ask? Well, I think that it's clear that this is a conversation that we need to continue. It's really crucial that we keep talking about these issues. WiredScore will host online a series of virtual events in the coming months to dive into more specific and particular aspects of smart buildings. Do go onto our website to read our white paper, much of the research of which you have heard about today, and do also look out for our smart building videos, the first of which we previewed earlier. Which leaves me just to say thank you all for being here today. I really do hope that we can see you in person soon. Thank you and goodbye.